I knew the HOA was crooked the minute they tried to tell me my own driveway wasn't mine. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping my coffee, about to head off to work, when I saw a woman standing at the foot of my driveway with a clipboard and a smug look that could sour milk. Her name was Glenda Cartwright, president of the Oak Hills Homeowners Association and self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. Every time I saw her bleach blonde bob bouncing toward me, I knew something absurd was about to come out of her mouth. She waved her clipboard like it was a royal decree. "Mr. Prescott Vance," she said, drawing out the syllables like I was on trial, "this driveway is technically part of the community's easement, meaning it's not private, it's public." I blinked. "Excuse me? I paid for that concrete. It's on my deed." Glenda adjusted her oversized sunglasses. "Well, the HOA board voted to reclassify it, and since it connects to the sidewalk, it now counts as part of the shared right-of-way. That means any neighbor can use it. For parking, walking their dogs, whatever." I laughed, thinking it was some messed-up joke. "No, not happening." She tapped her clipboard. "It's already been voted on. It's official. And if you interfere with community use, we'll start fining you." I stared at her, speechless. She turned and strutted off like she'd just delivered divine judgment. For the next 3 days, it was chaos. My neighbor's teenage son parked his rusty pickup halfway on my driveway. Some guy from 2 streets over started using it to turn around his landscaping trailer every morning at 6. A woman I'd never met let her dog poop on my driveway and walked away like it was her God-given right. I called the city. They confirmed that my deed clearly listed the driveway as private property, but the HOA had filed a community easement usage revision for the entire block, and while it didn't legally override my deed, it was enough gray area that enforcement was murky unless I sued. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I pulled out the HOA bylaws. I'd never looked at them before. They were dense, full of nonsense rules about paint colors and mailbox heights. But buried deep in Article 9, Section B4, I found something glorious. It stated, "Any property or facility owned by the HOA that is not maintained or used in accordance with community standards may be subject to reassignment or repurposing by a member in good standing, if the board fails to act within 30 days of formal notice." I paused. Then I read it again. The HOA office was a tiny building at the back of our neighborhood park, really more of a glorified shed with a printer and a mini fridge. And it was in horrible shape. Paint peeling, water damage around the base, and it hadn't been used for actual meetings in over a year. Everyone knew the board held their meetings at Glenda's house now. So I drafted a letter. I included 22 pictures of the HOA office's disrepair, including a raccoon that had made itself quite at home inside the ceiling tiles. I sent it certified mail to every board member, time-stamped and documented. Then I waited. 30 days. Not a peep. On day 31, I walked down to that sad little office with a locksmith and changed the locks. I posted a laminated sign on the door that read, "This property has been reassigned by a member in good standing per HOA Bylaws Article 9, Section B4. For access requests, contact Prescott Vance." Within 2 hours, Glenda was pounding on my front door like the FBI. "You have no right," she shouted, jabbing a red fingernail toward my chest. I crossed my arms. "I followed your rules. 30 days. No response. Unmaintained property. It's mine now. You're abusing the system." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm using it. You're the one abusing it." Kind of like when you told the whole neighborhood my driveway was public. Her face turned a shade of red I didn't know human skin could reach. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I smiled. "We'll see." Glenda didn't knock the next time. She marched right into my garage while I was tightening the bolts on a security camera I'd just installed above the driveway. Her eyes darted to the camera, then back to me, her jaw clenched tight enough to crush gravel. "You're being watched too, you know," she said, voice low and sharp. "Good," I replied, not looking up. "Transparency is good for everyone, especially boards who make up rules." She didn't flinch, but she did glance at the stack of folders sitting on a workbench behind me. I'd printed every HOA meeting minute from the last 3 years. Glenda didn't know yet that I'd also requested copies of all expenditure records through a state-level open records law. 2 of the board members had already responded. What they gave me didn't match up. "What exactly are you doing with that shed?" she asked, folding her arms. "Office," I corrected. "And I'm converting it into a community resource center. With actual transparency, monthly budget postings, open forums, first aid kits, even a lending library. Her expression twitched. You have no right to represent this community. I'm not trying to, I said. But I've read the bylaws now. And funny thing, there's no rule against a resident repurposing an abandoned facility if it's neglected, which it was. I've got the mold test results to prove it. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. You walked onto my property without permission. That's trespassing. Next time, it's a police report. She left without another word. That night, I installed a solar-powered floodlight over the HOA office and posted a laminated schedule of upcoming events, legal workshops, community gardening planning, and a document shredding day for residents to safely destroy old paperwork. I included a contact email. Within 48 hours, I had 27 RSVPs. The board responded by issuing a cease and desist. They claimed I was impersonating an HOA official. They mailed it, hand-delivered it, and posted it on the front door of the office. I responded by filing a counter-notice with the City Council's Neighborhood Oversight Committee. I included scanned copies of their own bylaws and documented violations. Turns out, the city didn't even have a record of the HOA's revised easement filing that Glinda had been waving around. It had been submitted, yes, but it was missing a required city approval stamp. Without that, it was meaningless. I received confirmation from the city clerk 2 days later. The easement revision had never been legally ratified, and the shared use claim? Completely unenforceable. I made 25 copies of that memo and placed them in waterproof pamphlet holders around the community. One in the park, one by the mailbox cluster, one taped gently to the windshield of the teenager's pickup. Glinda tried a new tactic. This time, she brought backup. 2 board members, guy with a Bluetooth earpiece who never made eye contact, and a woman who wore a scarf like it was a courtroom exhibit stood behind her as she arrived at my front door with a new clipboard. This is a formal demand, she said. Return control of the HOA office to the board. Didn't know you had control to begin with, I said. We both know you haven't held a public meeting there in over a year. You're interfering with official operations. No, I replied. I'm documenting everything. I've got over 100 pictures, 3 months of emails, and I've filed a formal complaint with the State Homeowners Regulatory Commission. Guy adjusted his Bluetooth and tried to interject. I also consulted with a property attorney, I added. Turns out, if you knowingly alter HOA documents and present them as binding when they're not, that's called fraud. Especially if you collect fines based on them. The scarf-wearing woman stepped forward. You don't understand how these things work. I do now, I said. I've read every bylaw, every filing, every financial statement. Want to know what I found? They stayed silent. $17,000 in landscape maintenance payments last year. To a company owned by your cousin, who doesn't even have a business license. Glinda's posture stiffened. You've been using HOA dues to fund your relatives. That's embezzlement. I've already submitted the findings to the county. Silence hung in the air like fog. They left without another word. The next day, I got a call from Officer Linares, a community liaison with the county sheriff's department. The city clerk had flagged my complaint and passed it to their financial crimes unit. Linares asked if I could come down and bring the documents I'd collected. I brought everything. Receipts, scanned emails, screenshots of the HOA website before and after edits, and even a voice recording from a neighbor who'd been pressured into paying a fine under threat of lien over a missing house number that had never existed in the first place. 2 weeks later, subpoenas were issued. It turned out Glinda had been running a quiet little racket for years. She created a shell landscaping company under her cousin's name, billed the HOA monthly, and split the money. The board had rubber-stamped every invoice without ever reviewing the work. Meanwhile, she selectively enforced fines against residents who questioned her authority. She'd even forged inspection reports for properties she didn't like, then used them to justify penalties. The county prosecutor didn't hesitate. Fraud, misuse of community funds, falsification of legal documents. All felonies. But the real kicker came from the state auditor. Turns out, when Glinda filed that bogus easement revision, she'd used a notary stamp that expired 2 years earlier. She knew it too because the notary was her sister-in-law. Forgery on a state document? Now we were talking prison time. The HOA board was dissolved by emergency vote. The city appointed an interim trustee to manage the transition. I was asked to serve on the oversight committee, but I declined. I had no interest in becoming what I just fought against. Instead, I helped the community set up a residence council, voluntary, transparent, and advisory only. No fines. No threats. Just neighbors working together. The HOA office? We kept it open. It became a hub for everything from toy drives to CPR classes. A retired firefighter taught fire safety to kids there every other Saturday. A single mom started a seed swap. We even had a neighborhood mural painted on the outside wall by a local art teacher. Glenda? She tried to sell her house quietly during the investigation, but the county froze her assets. Her name hit the local news. She pled out to avoid jail, but she had to pay restitution and surrender her role in any future HOA-related activity. I never saw her again after that. But every time I walked past that little building, the one she claimed was hers, I remember what she said that first day, clipboard in hand, voice dripping with control. And I think about how different things are now. Not because I wanted power, but because I wouldn't give mine away. It didn't take long for the neighborhood's mood to shift. After the board was dissolved, residents who had kept their heads down for years started milling about with a new kind of energy. People were talking again on sidewalks, at the park, even in driveways they used to avoid. You could hear the difference. Laughter where there used to be silence. Questions where there used to be fear. But the cleanup wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The interim trustee assigned by the city, a no-nonsense woman named Deidre Knox, called a public audit meeting in the community center gymnasium. She had the kind of presence that didn't need volume to command attention: sharp eyes, press slacks, and a clipboard she actually used. I've reviewed the last 4 fiscal years, she said from the podium. There are discrepancies that go beyond mismanagement. What we're looking at is systemic abuse of authority. A ripple passed through the room. Then she clicked the projector. On the screen appeared a spreadsheet, line items categorized by year. Landscaping fees were the tip of the iceberg. There were charges listed for legal consulting paid to a non-existent firm. Equipment rentals that overlapped with Glenda's cousin's construction company. Even food delivery expenses billed to HOA funds, nearly $600 worth in a single month, all to the same address. A few rows down, something caught my eye. Office repairs, I said aloud. But no repairs were ever done. Deidre nodded. Exactly. We cross-referenced those with property inspection reports. The office was never serviced, which means those receipts were either faked or misused. A man in the back raised his hand. How much are we talking? Deidre tapped her clipboard. Preliminary estimate? Just shy of $98,000 over 4 years. Someone swore under their breath. And that's just what we've confirmed, she added. I leaned forward. Has the county prosecutor seen this? They have now, she said. And they're expanding the investigation. The room was still. Then Deidre stepped down from the podium and walked toward me. Mr. Vance, would you mind staying after? I did. She led me into a side room with a portable whiteboard and a stack of banker's boxes. She opened one, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table. I need your help connecting something, she said. Inside were copies of checks signed by Glenda and 2 other board members, same amounts, same payees, but cashed on different days. The addresses linked to P.O. boxes in a neighboring city. The checks were labeled as reimbursement for community outreach programs. There were no programs, I said. Exactly. But the routing numbers match a private account held under a shell company. One we believe was created to launder HOA funds. I stared at the page. You think this was organized? More than that, she said. We believe it was deliberate wire fraud, which makes it federal. I exhaled slowly. What do you need from me? Testify, she said. You've got the most complete timeline of events. Not just documents, you've got context. You flagged the easement scam before anyone else. And your reassignment of the office? That's the only reason we caught the mold issue before it spread to the adjacent park structure. I nodded. Let me know the date. 2 weeks later, I sat at a witness table in a county courtroom while a U.S. district attorney laid out the charges. Glenda wasn't the only one indicted. The Bluetooth-wearing board member? He'd been depositing HOA funds into an account linked to a boat rental business he ran on weekends. The scarf woman? She'd been signing off on fictitious invoices for a pest control company that hadn't operated in over a decade. The judge didn't need long. Glenda was given a sentence of 5 years, with restitution and permanent ban from any fiduciary role in a housing association. The others took plea deals, less time, but full cooperation required. They handed over laptops, emails, even burner phones used for internal communications. But the most shocking part came from the forensic accountant's final report. Turns out, the HOA had been collecting dues from 12 homes that didn't exist. Fake addresses set up in the system to inflate the budget. 12 sets of payments, all mailed to a Dropbox owned by the former treasurer's brother-in-law. That's how they padded the budget and justified the inflated expenses. It wasn't just theft, it was identity fraud. The court ordered an immediate dissolution of the HOA's financial structure. The city absorbed the remaining budget and set up a community oversight grant to help residents transition to a voluntary council. Still, not everyone trusted the system yet. And I didn't blame them. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I ran for city council. Not for power. For protection. If a few people could do this much damage with nothing but letterhead and a mailbox key, then someone had to be watching from above. I registered as an independent, ran on a platform of housing transparency, and spent every weekend walking door to door not just in Oak Hills, but in 4 other neighborhoods facing similar issues. I won by 13 votes. The first thing I did in office? Drafted a city ordinance requiring all HOAs to file annual reports directly with the city clerk's office, not just with homeowners. Every expenditure over $500 had to be pre-approved by a verified third party. And every complaint filed against an HOA had to receive a response within 10 business days, or the city would step in to mediate. That ordinance passed unanimously. Back in Oak Hills, the community council was thriving. We had quarterly town halls, open books, volunteer committees for everything from playground maintenance to block parties. No fines, no threats, just neighbors with a shared space and a shared sense of fairness. The driveway? Still mine. But now, it was more than just concrete. It was the line I'd drawn when no one else would. One afternoon, I was setting up folding chairs outside the old HOA office, now officially renamed the Oak Hills Civic Room, when a man with a clipboard approached. Middle-aged, polo shirt, trying to look official. "Afternoon," he said. "You the one overseeing this place?" I nodded. He glanced around. "I'm with a property management company. We're evaluating neighborhoods for HOA reinstatement proposals." I didn't answer. Just waited. He continued. "We specialize in community compliance, uniformity standards, property value preservation. We could bring a lot of order to a place like this." I leaned against the doorframe. "We had order once," I said. "It came with forged documents, stolen funds, and a raccoon living in the ceiling." He blinked. "We're good," I said. "Move along." He hesitated, then flipped his clipboard shut and walked away. I watched him go, then turned back to the chairs. The first kids started arriving for the community chess club. One of them asked if we'd have snacks again. I told him yes, and this time, the receipts would be real. 3 months after the trial, Oak Hills had become something I never expected. Peaceful. Not quiet. There were kids yelling at the park again, neighbors debating flower beds, and the occasional leaf blower war, but peaceful, in the way a place feels when no one's watching you with a clipboard or measuring your grass height with a ruler. I was finishing a Saturday morning fix-it session at the Civic Room, replacing a faulty outlet near the coffee station, when Deidre Knox showed up again, this time without her clipboard. She carried a manila folder and wore a look I'd come to recognize as something serious just landed on my desk. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and nodded toward the folding chairs stacked in the corner. "Got a minute?" I wiped my hands on a rag and "Saturday, what's going on?" She opened the folder and turned it around. "This name ring a bell?" I read it. Marcus Yates. It didn't. Supposedly a contractor hired by the former HOA to survey the neighborhood's drainage systems. He billed the HOA nearly $25,000 over 18 months. No license. No physical address. Claim was, he used subcontractors. Problem is, we just found out Marcus Yates is a dead man. Died 2 years before the first invoice. I raised my eyebrows. So who was cashing his checks? "That's the problem," she said. "The account they were deposited into was opened using a forged state ID. And that account wired most of the funds to another bank. Offshore." I stood up. "You're telling me they were laundering money through a fake contractor?" "Worse," she said. "It looks like they were using HOA funds to clean money from somewhere else. We brought in federal investigators." IRS forensic team flagged the routing paths. One of the accounts is linked to a larger fraud case they've been tracking for over a year. I leaned against the table, heart pounding. "You're saying the HOA wasn't just running scams on homeowners. They were part of an actual criminal operation?" Yes, she said. And they used the HOA as a front. Fake vendors, inflated maintenance contracts, and forged community improvement projects. But that's not why I'm here. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a photo. It showed the old HOA office before I'd taken it over. A black SUV was parked behind it, mostly concealed by the trees. The timestamp was from late last year. This vehicle showed up at least 8 times between midnight and 4 a.m., according to park security cam archives we pulled from the city's wildlife monitoring program. No one ever reported anything stolen or vandalized. But we found something strange in the floorboards when we started the mold remediation work. She handed me a second photo. It showed a hollowed-out section beneath one of the cabinets. Inside were 3 flash drives, a burner phone with no SIM, and a sealed envelope labeled, "Why?" "We haven't cracked the flash drives yet," she said. "But our cybersecurity team is on it." The burners wiped. The envelope contained a set of ledger entries handwritten and a list of names. Some we recognize. Others we don't. I was quiet for a long time. "So what do you need from me now?" She gave a tired smile. "Nothing. You've done enough. But I thought you deserved to know. Because this wasn't just HOA corruption. It was a full-blown racketeering operation hiding behind mailbox covenants and community garden rules." Later that afternoon, I got a call from a federal agent named Whitaker. He spoke with a clipped accent that sounded Midwestern and military, and he didn't waste time. "We're rolling this into a larger RICO case," he said. "We believe Oak Hills was one of at least 6 communities used as laundering hubs. The others are in different states. Similar patterns: shell landscaping companies, inflated assessments, and falsified board member elections." I sat on my porch, watching kids trade sidewalk chalk for water balloons. "Any ties to organized crime?" "Too early to say definitively," he said. "But some of the bank transfers linked to flagged accounts. We're coordinating with Interpol. It's messy, but we wouldn't have known about any of it if you hadn't taken over that office." By the end of that month, the Department of Justice made an official announcement. 27 individuals across 4 states were indicted under federal racketeering charges. Among them were former HOA officers, contractors, and one attorney who had drafted fraudulent easement agreements for multiple communities. Glenda's name was mentioned again. The feds had traced at least 4 offshore transfers to an account she opened under a fake business name. Her plea deal was revoked. She was taken back into custody. And yet, Oak Hills remained steady. We held a community gathering the following weekend. Not a celebration, more like a reckoning. People brought folding chairs and lemonade, and we set up a projector in the park to show the DOJ press conference. When Glenda's mugshot came up for the second time, no one cheered. Just a long, collective exhale. Afterward, I stood by the grill flipping burgers while a neighbor I barely knew, a retired nurse named Carol, came over with a plate of brownies. "I always thought you were just a quiet guy who didn't like rules," she said. I chuckled. "I still don't like rules. But I like justice more." She nodded. "Well, if you ever run for mayor, let me know. You've got my vote." I didn't answer. But that night, I sat down and opened a blank document on my laptop. Not a campaign speech, just a list of things I'd learned. At the top, I wrote, "Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals who is already rotten." Below that, I started drafting a proposal for a statewide HOA oversight board, one that would require all associations to register their vendors, submit third-party audits, and make their bylaws publicly accessible. No more hiding behind fine print. A month later, I drove to the state capitol and handed it to a senator I'd met during the council transition. He read it in silence, then asked one question. "Would you testify to support this?" I said yes. By fall, the Oak Hills Civic Room had become the pulse of the neighborhood. A retired engineer started offering free tax prep there. A middle school teacher ran a weekend coding boot camp for kids. And every Friday, we hosted open mic nights, music, poetry, even a guy who did impressions of every U.S. president in order. One evening, a man in a suit showed up. He didn't say much. Just sat in the back, laughing quietly with the rest. Afterward, he approached me. "You did something rare," he said. "Most people wouldn't bother." I shrugged. "Most people shouldn't have to." He gave a small nod, then handed me a card. "If you ever want to take this further state level, maybe even regional, I'd be interested in sponsoring you." I looked at the card. It was embossed with a gold seal. "I'll think about it," I said. As he left, I stepped outside and looked down the street, my street. The one they tried to say wasn't mine. The one I had defended not with fists or threats, but with paperwork, patience, and a little bit of righteous defiance. The sun was setting behind the civic room, casting long shadows across the newly painted mural on its wall. It showed a tree growing out of a cracked sidewalk, its roots weaving through bricks, pipes, and wires. Buried in the roots were scraps of old paper bylaws, citations, fake invoices, all being pulled down, crushed, and replaced with shoots of new growth. At the base of the tree, someone had painted a single word: ours. Not mine. Not theirs. Ours. And that was the victory.